when you work on the wheel, there's something very demanding about centering. It takes strength, but it also takes feel. When the clay is just right in the center, you can feel it. And it's not something you can explain. And the same thing is true in life. If you have your life centered around something that you are especially talented to do, and you found that thing, then your life is centered around that. And everything else relates to that. When you shape the piece of clay, before you can make any individual bowls or vases or other shapes, you have to have the mass of clay centered. And you have to center your energy and your life first before you can have things grow out of it. Works of art, children, whatever. I always have this feeling that dreams, as well as fantasizing, are just as much a part of your real life as real life, of what happens every day. They make up your character. After all, after you have an experience, it becomes a memory, and there's no difference between that memory and the memory of any dream. When your mind becomes saturated with a problem, you can't resolve it. Something's wrong and it doesn't work. It's as though you're going into the library and you can't find the right book. So you forget about it, you put it out of your mind. But the mind, as a separate part of you, can operate on its own. It can go through those stacks, taking out miscellaneous books, and might just by accident almost pull out the answer once you let go and stop thinking about it. I'm glad I changed this arm because the gesture of the figure now makes much more sense. This was too contorted and it was reaching out too far. The one I did before this, I had a figure. I left it on a stand and I sprayed it and it got too wet, and while I was away the thing leaned, fell on the floor, and I lost 2 weeks' work. But it's nothing lost because I had the experience of having done it. So it doesn't make you feel bad at all. I went into another one. This is the very first pot I ever made, and it was fired. First one I carried out all the way to a finish. Guess who made that? Picasso. don't know if you can pick this up, the light is pretty bad. But this is dated 1935 by a man named Grunwald. When I lived in the Bronx and I was just a kid, let's see, how old was I? This is 35. I was 13 years old. I didn't know anybody who was an artist. I had no connection with the art world. And to have somebody living in our house who was a boarder in our house who painted every evening, it intrigued me because I wanted to do it. I used to stand outside his room and he'd left the door open a crack. And I'd watch him for hours. Just wouldn't say a word. And I thought he didn't know I was watching, but he knew. And then on my birthday, he gave me this painting and he gave me a set to work with. That started me off.
He was a big influence on Harry. I would say he was the biggest influence because he learned to draw from him and he learned to paint. And he used to, this man, I don't know what he did. His name was Mr. Greenwall, that's all I know. And he used to go on trips and come back with little gifts for us because, you know, we didn't have very much.
It was a tough neighborhood. It was divided up into gangs. The avenues had gangs, the streets were free passages. I was in the gangs all of my childhood until I went to high school. But I had a teacher who thought I was talented, and I had painted several murals for the school, and she thought it was a shame that I wasn't going to this new high school at May LaGuardia. It just started, the High School of Music and Art, which later became very famous as the Fame School and all that. Well, I passed the test with flying colors, but my academics were bad, and my speech was such that unless you came from the same area of the Bronx, you couldn't understand a word I said.
And I was very proud that Harry got a scholarship. I couldn't imagine anybody getting one, you know, because that was, well, it's just wonderful, I thought. And I admired him for it. I used to think he was a genius, actually.
When I graduated, they gave awards for the best artist in the class, best musician, and I got the best sculptor in the class. In graduating from the High School of Music and Art, I got a free scholarship to the Beaux-Arts Institute of Design. Almost all the successful sculptors in the United States would take turns teaching there. You spent a year copying plaster molds, and then when they decided that you were good enough, you could work from the live model. And the model had to take the same pose and they rotated it. And you worked about 3/4 size. You had to do every muscle, everything right. You had to have all your proportions right. You were like a camera, you were replicating what you saw. And the closer you came to that, the better the piece of work, no matter how ugly it looked. And then when you were all done at the end, you take pictures of it, and then you break it all up, throw it in the clay bar, start on the next model. At the end of every year, they chose the most successful student to get a Tiffany grant. That was the top award for the class. Usually you're there 6 to 10 years before you win a prize. And I got the first prize, that's 2 years. I ended up doing a life-size figure out of clay of this woman who was posing. I had no idea what the Tiffany thing was. All I knew was that all my expenses would be paid for a summer out on Long Island doing sculpture. Right at that moment, the war had begun and the draft had begun, and I was bound to be coming up. I was just 21.